The Capitals at the trade deadline. It didn't seem like they got as much done as they had hoped for. The Capitals only move center Evgeny Kuznetsov to the Carolina Hurricanes. I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this bonus edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in this special edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the movement for the Capitals or the lack thereof on the trade deadline. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So that was it for the Capitals today, is that center Evgeny Kuznetsov was traded out to the Carolina Hurricanes. I know as a fan of this team, I was hoping for a whole lot more, that there was going to be a lot of pieces in flux that were going to get moved. As we know that center Nick Dowd is still on the team. Max Pacioretty is still on this team. Charlie Lindgren. So it does appear as though the Capitals are trying to make a push for the playoffs, despite where they are in the standings. Even though they aren't totally out of it, they are what appears to be in it, trying to make a push for the playoffs. But the big news today for the Capitals was that they pulled off the improbable by moving center Evgeny Kuznetsov out to the Carolina Hurricanes. A bit of an interesting thing that broke earlier this morning was that he had actually showed up for the game for the Hershey Bears tonight and then jumped on the plane of the Hurricanes owner and was practicing today. The Capitals did the highly improbable by trading 2010 first-rounder Evgeny Kuznetsov to the Carolina Hurricanes. Kuzi was in Charlotte and ready to play in his first game as a Hershey Bear, and then suddenly was shuttled on the Hurricane owner's private jet, picked him up to take him to Raleigh. And what did the Capitals get in return? They got, well, what they got throughout this whole trade deadline time, this entire week that led up to the trade deadline, a 2025 third-round pick. Washington is retaining 50% on Kuznetsov. One more year left at $7.8 million. So ultimately, as I look at it, I think that it is a victory for the Capitals, as I think that Kuznetsov would have been an albatross hanging around their neck for at least the next year. And ultimately, I hope he gets his opportunity of playing with Carolina and gets some playing time, as it does appear he will be playing on the second line. A lot of things are in flux. One of the good things that we know for Evgeny Kuznetsov is he will be able to play with his fellow Russian countrymen in Dmitry Orlov, of course, who has a history with the Capitals, not to mention Svechnikov. So there is already some, likenesses or familiarity with Evgeny Kuznetsov and some of the other players on the team. So things are trending in the right direction for him. As a Capitals fan, my reaction to all of it is, I guess they got something. They got a draft pick. I know they had to retain some salary. Not an optimal situation, I guess. I was hoping for more from the Capitals, that they would be able to get something more for him, but it wasn't to be. But that is where the Capitals are at. It was a pretty slow trade deadline. So if you were hoping for any fireworks, if you were hoping for any big acquisitions, you will be sorely disappointed. Again, as I record this at 3:08 Eastern time, there could still be moves trickling in. But all things considered, it was one of the slower trade deadlines. There wasn't a lot of fireworks. There were some bigger moves. The Gensel deal comes out as one of the bigger moves that took place. But just taking a look at it, I was hoping for more. And I think as Capitals fans, you were as well. And Kuzi was talking about here that he knows that a lot is at stake. Some of his first words as a Hurricane were, "This is my last chance. I have to make the most of this opportunity." And I think that that is one of the things that you're looking at here, is that he's not going to be given a lot more opportunities. That he ultimately does have to make the most of his opportunity. Is he ultimately going to make the most of it? I guess it remains to be seen. But one of the good things about Kuznetsov right now is that he has a rapport with head coach Rod Brind'Amour. They spoke glowingly of one another, that there is a mutual respect there. So hopefully that will be an in for him there. There is the history with Rod Brind'Amour, as they were involved in the 2022 All-Star group. There is what is said to be a mutual admiration between the two of them. And already people are speculating on where Kuznetsov will fit into the lineup. Already I was taking a look at the Hurricanes and how they had him drafted in, and they had him drafted in as a second-round center. Again, it's been some time since Evgeny Kuznetsov has taken the ice, at least in game time activity. So it'll be interesting to see what he has in the tank out on the ice. But if you take a look at the Hurricanes, they are in the hunt. They are making a push. And it doesn't, really surprise me that they're going all in, that they are making these big acquisitions. And I think that they are poised to do some bigger and better things. Make no mistake about it. But, that was the big thing, of the day. And that was the move that I didn't see coming. The first move that I had projected was that Nick Dowd would be on the move. It seemed like everyone had him circled as a player that they wanted on their team. But my hunch is that, you take a look at GM Brian McClellan. I think that he is all in on a push here. I think that, he didn't get the return that he was hoping for, or that a lot of teams said that they were going to offer him. And like he said at his press conference, he said, we're not just going to dump players. So you take a look at the activity for the Capitals this week, talking about Mantha and Edmondson, and I'll talk about them a little bit later. Those were the big moves. Again, unless there are some moves trickling in, and as I check my phone here, there is nothing news breaking for the Capitals right now. Another player that was said to be on the move, Dave Pagnotta of the fourth period, said that he thought that Max Pacioretty was going to be on the move. But that the Florida Panthers were all in on him, and also the New York Rangers, as that would have been his hometown playing there. But as it stands, Brian McClellan said that he's being taken off the table, and the Capitals want to hold on to Max Pacioretty. So taking a look at this team, what have they acquired? They've acquired a lot of draft capital. That's what they have. That's what they're going to go into the summer with. I expect during free agency or around the draft time that they are going to try to flip some of that draft capital for some players, because obviously, you minus some players, you minus Kuznetsov, you minus Mantha with his 20 goals, and Joel Edmondson, that rugged defender, that there is a gap. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Capitals plan on doing going forward here. Taking a look here on Locked On Law, the comment here was that hopefully Kuznetsov can get his life together. It wasn't going to happen here. Again, he chimed in here and said, I expected a team to want Lindgren. He's been the better goaltender. And I can see where you're coming from there, that I thought that there were going to be more teams in on him, as well as we also hear in other news around the NHL, just kind of an impromptu episode here, is that Allen of the Montreal Canadiens is going out to the New Jersey Devils. And if you are an everydayer of the show, I talk about all the time that the New Jersey Devils are, in my what I thought were one goaltender away from being a contender. So I ultimately think that the New Jersey Devils got a whole lot better. I also think the Carolina Hurricanes got a whole lot better with the acquisitions of Gensel and Kuznetsov. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. How is it all going to fit together? But the teams that, are, perceived to be in it, they're really loading up. You take a look at this entire week on what's gone on around the NHL. The Vegas Golden Knights have got a lot better. And a lot of the other teams that are in the hunt have gotten a lot better. You take a look at the Florida Panthers. They are arming up. And what are the Capitals left with? Again, here is draft picks. Tarek Elbashir tweeted this out here earlier. The Capitals now have 26 selections over the next 3 drafts. That's tied for the 4th most. So to say they have draft capital and a lot of options would be an understatement. How are they going to plan on flipping those? If we remember historically, it was like with Rasmus Sandin. Of course, it's not going to be a deal similar to that this year, just given the fact that they have been quiet on the trade deadline. But talking about why the Capitals are potentially in it, they currently sit with 67 points. The New York Islanders with 70. So the Capitals are not out of it. There still is the chance that they can make a push. Do I think that they have hopes of making a deep push into the playoffs? Not necessarily. But what I am saying is that, that's Brian McClellan's assessment, is that they're still in it, and he is a man of his word. He didn't just dump players. You got to think that there was probably quite a few teams around the National Hockey League that did their level best to try to acquire Nick Dowd, Nicholas Aube-Kubel, Charlie Lindgren. So there was quite a bit of fear amongst Capitals fans that I heard on Twitter, that I heard on YouTube, that please don't do it. Don't move out Charlie Lindgren. And a bit surprised at the end of the day. I know that they have Clay Stevenson in the wings, not to mention Hunter Shepard and Darcy Kemper, that there were some teams out there that were definitely all in on a netminder. Were the New Jersey Devils kicking the tires on someone like Charlie Lindgren? That I guess I don't know right now. And ultimately, if Charlie Lindgren wasn't moved, the Capitals did not get the return that they were ultimately looking for. So taking a look at it, and just, again, I was hoping for a whole lot more from the Capitals, a little bit of a lackluster showing from the Capitals in what they were planning on doing. The next comment here is from the great Baden. He said here, I expect maybe Dowd, Jansen, and Lindgren to be traded next year. So that is always possible, I guess. You take a look at Jansen. He was yet another name that was out being circulated about being on the move. I know that Toronto was all in on Jansen at one point. And then, of course, we know that Edmondson went up to Toronto. So, and what is the rumblings that I'm hearing out there is that he has already kind of, won the locker room. He's talked to some of the players up there already, and he already appears to have a rapport. And then getting used to the little things is seeing Anthony Mantha in a Golden Knights jersey. Kind of surprising and kind of bittersweet and kind of odd, talking about Anthony Mantha, and I'll talk about him a little bit later, is that last summer, everyone said, do whatever it takes, just get him out of here. He came into this season a changed man, put up 20 goals, and now is playing on a team that is in contention for sure for winning another Stanley Cup. So again, as you look at this, you got to be happy for the guys that played on the team. You take a look at Joel Edmondson. He was a bit of a journeyman anyway, so I didn't have any feelings that he was going to be on this team for the long term. But for Anthony Mantha, other than this year, this was his best year as a Capital, and I ultimately wish him nothing but the best in his future endeavors. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about the other movement, not just the trade deadline, but trade deadline week. What to make of it, I'll discuss coming up. Eating better is easy with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-created, dietitian approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. You'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Also, there are more than 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feeling good all day. What are you waiting for? Get it started today and get after your meals. 2-minute meals fuel up fast with Factor's restaurant-quality meals that are ready to heat and eat wherever you are. Pancakes, smoothies, and more. Discover a wide variety of easy options for the entire day, like breakfast, midday bites, and more. No prep, No mess, no meals. Factor meals are ready to heat and eat, so there's no prepping, no cooking, and no cleanup needed. And that's so important. Life is so busy, so do yourself a favor and head over to Factor Meals. Head to factormeals.com/lockedonnhl50 and use code LOCKEDONNHL50 to get 50% off. That's code LOCKEDONNHL50 at factormeals.com/lockedonnhl50 to get 50% off. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, welcome back into this special live edition of Locked On Capitals, talking about the Capitals at the 2024 trade deadline. And I know for sure that I went into this with high hopes that the Capitals were going to swing for the fences and pick up a player that's similar to Rasmus Sandin, except a forward, preferably a center. But there was a premium put on centers. That is why the Carolina Hurricanes took a flyer on Evgeny Kuznetsov. And you take a look around there, he is a bit of a risk. You take a look at it, he was 2 different times in the players assistance program, but that is where the Hurricanes are at, and where the Capitals were at is they were just ready to be rid of his contract, even though they had to retain some of his salary. But let's just kind of reflect on what else was done this week. Joel Edmondson to Toronto. And what did that mean for some other players on the blue line? Well, that meant that Ethan Bear drew back into the mix. The Capitals have acquired the New York Islanders' 3rd-round pick in 2024 and the Chicago Blackhawks' 5th-round pick in 2025. The Caps will retain 50% of Edmondson's salary. Through 44 games this season, Edmondson had scored 1 goal and 5 assists, as well as a plus-minus of -5. He is set to be an unrestricted free agent in July. This is the 2nd consecutive year that the Caps have made a deal for defensemen with Toronto. As we remember, they acquired Rasmus Sandin. So taking a look at it, there is a back and forth with Toronto. And do I think that there is a long-term plan for Joel Edmondson on the Maple Leafs? Well, I guess it's going to depend to see, how he's going to fit into their lineup. I know that the Toronto Maple Leafs are a team that chases after the cup harder than any other team out there. They just seem to fall short. That is a team, that is a city that loves hockey like none other, that no matter where they are in the standings, they're constantly playing in a full arena. So can Joel Edmondson be the guy to, pick up the slack on the back end and had some stability to a Toronto Maple Leafs team that's making a push? So that was one of the big moves that was made, is Joel Edmondson. And I don't think that should come as any surprise to Capitals fans. Again, he is going to be a UFA in July and could potentially be on to the next one. It's just that the Capitals looked at their current situation and who they have down in Hershey and the players that are available. Is this going to be a really good opportunity for Alex Alexiev? You better believe it's going to be. Ethan Bear, who's already a guy that came here with such hype, that there was a lot of other teams around the NHL that were looking for his services. And he ultimately chose to come to the Capitals. Why? Not just because of the money, but the Capitals offered him some term. So this is going to be a really great opportunity for a player like Ethan Bear to show what he has in the tank. That even though he appears to be in the, not really good graces of Spencer Carberry and Mitch Love, this is going to be his opportunity to prove that, hey, coach, put me in. I'm capable, I'm competent, and I deserve a job on the blue line for the Capitals. Will he make the most of it? I guess it remains to be seen. But I am most happy for Alex Alexiev, as he was a guy that was circled for the Capitals to be the year for Alex Alexiev. And then something crazy happened, is that the Capitals brought in Joel Edmondson, and all of a sudden, Alex Alexiev got pushed to the back burner. So now this is an excellent opportunity, like I said, for him to shine, to show what he has in the tank, and ultimately, hopefully, make the most of his opportunity. So one man's loss is another man's gain. That was the case for Joel Edmondson, and that is going to be the case for players like Alexiev and Ethan Bear as well. Taking a look at other activity around the Capitals during this period is they did help solidify not only the present, but the future for the Capitals as they put Rasmus Sandin under a 5-year extension worth $23 million. And I like that move. I think that, you take a look at Rasmus Sandin, he fits in to be the present for the Capitals, of course, and the future, and locking him up long term. What is one of the things that we had heard is that the first thing he said is it's a 5-year deal, but I want to play here longer. And being that he is a younger man, that he could definitely potentially do that as long as he continues to contribute. And one of the things that I liked against the game when the Capitals were playing the Penguins last night is a physical flair. He wanted to take on Lars Eller. It did appear that Rasmus Sandin is a smaller man, but that did not deter him from taking on Lars Eller. So that despite the fact that he is not the biggest guy on the ice, he was willing to step up. He's one of the 3 players signed through 2029, joining Tom Wilson and Alexei Protas. Sandin was picked up last year around the trade deadline and figures to be a part of the Capitals' present, of course, and the future. And those are the building blocks, along with Martin Faravari and potentially Ethan Bear, that those are going to be the future. A little bit further down the pipeline is Chesley. There's also Vinny Iorio in there. So the Capitals' blue line does look brighter, and it looks more bright with Rasmus Sandin under contract for 5 years. He got off to a slow start, but appears to be firing on all cylinders. Now has 20 points in 53 games. And he loves it here. He says, I love this organization. It's something you've been dreaming about and hoping for, but you really never thought it was going to happen. At 23 years old, I think he is an important defensive player for the Capitals to build around. So taking a look at the Capitals, what they've addressed at the trade deadline, again, I was hoping for one of the bigger sexy names around the NHL. Like, wouldn't that be something if Gensel came to the Capitals, or Noah Hannafin? And I know that those players were spoke for earlier, but that's what I was hoping for, because as it stands right now is that we have a lot of young talent, peppered in with some, players that have been here for a while. So if you were hoping for Brian McClellan to swing for the fences, well, he did not do that. What he did, however, was accumulate quite a bit of draft capital. Taking a look at some of the comments here, saying Red Wings 01 here, is that he was saying, still, we walk away with a lot of draft capital and leave some room for younger guys to get opportunities. And I hear you here, Red Wings 01. So again, that is the flexibility that is surprised that the Capitals have. He also went on to say, surprised Dowd and Pacioretty didn't get traded. I guess Patches didn't waive the no move clause. And that was one of the things that Pagnotta had mentioned in the 4th period, is that they went to Max Pacioretty asking him if he would be willing to waive that. And it did seem like there was a distinct possibility that might happen, being that was his hometown team. He wasn't from New York. I want to say he's from like Connecticut or that type of area around there. So that was the closest area, or that was his team that he was rooting for growing up here. Talking about here, Wayne is the next one here that has a comment. Cap space for next year is going to be maybe 16 to 19 million next year, and we still have the chance this year. Okay, Wayne, there is definitely looking at this season as a season of like a cup that's half full instead of half empty. I like your outlook. And again, stranger things have happened. We saw what Tom Wilson said yesterday. He spoke in the locker room, and he said, listen, guys, even though we made some moves, even though Edmondson and Mantha and today Kuznetsov got moved out, we are still in it. We're not out of it. There is a history in this locker room. There are still a lot of players on this lineup that played in the Stanley Cup in 2018. We have what it takes, and hopefully he's right. And that's leading by example from your future captain, Tom Wilson. The great Baden here went on to say here, I expect maybe Dowd, Jensen, and Lindgren to be traded next year. That is always the possibility. I guess it remains to be seen. But again, this is a special live edition, so I'm able to get to a lot of your comments here. But that's where we're at, Capitals fans. Again, I was hoping for something big. I was hoping to be able to come with you guys with some big news. But as it stands right now, nothing major. As I'm recording this, I feel the need to check my phone because I know the minute that I hit this and this recording that there is going to be something that came in after the wire. But as it appears that there is no major movement for the Capitals, nothing that trickled in like sometimes does in previous years. So this is where we're at. This is the lineup out there right now. And if the lineup on the ice, like what we saw for the Capitals yesterday was any indication of if this Capitals team still has the potential of winning, well, I think that was quite evidence as they just trounced the Pittsburgh Penguins in a convincing fashion. Now, listen, I know that this isn't, the Penguins team of years ago. This isn't the Capitals team of years ago, but it was a decisive victory as they blanked their arch nemesis in the Pittsburgh Penguins. And it wasn't just like an eked out victory. It was a convincing victory. Make no mistake about it. Taking a look at here, Locked On Law said a 6-0 win against the Penguins is big. It was a big win. And I think that, maybe there was, GM Brian McClellan was thinking about maybe I should move Charlie Lindgren. Maybe I can get a big return, but then maybe, hey, has this team turned the corner? Are we still in it? I guess I don't know. I guess there is a school of thought out there that maybe they want to maximize the return of a guy like Charlie Lindgren, that maybe they could, move him at the draft or in July during free agency, that you could maximize your return. Because, the interesting thing is you take a look at the players that were moved. You take a look like at Gensel, you take a look at Kuznetsov. They did not yield a first-round pick. And ultimately, I think that that's what the Capitals were looking for, were first-round picks. And they didn't, get that. And I think that, a player like Charlie Lindgren or a Nick Dowd, or, if you bundle those two players together, could have potentially yielded quite a huge return. But it didn't do that. So you take a look at it. The Capitals are standing pat, and that is where we're at. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about the other movement for the Capitals this week. A key piece this season. Yes, it's kind of surprising for me to say, but Anthony Mantha is now a Golden Knight. What does that mean for the Capitals for the remainder of the season? I'll discuss coming up. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find the quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner, and you can do it all with Indeed. So if you are in the business of hiring, say you just hire people, or you are involved in HR, you need a friend like Indeed. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked-on. Offer valid through March 31st. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. Once again, Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire. You need Indeed. All right, welcome back into this special bonus edition of Locked On Capitals. It is the 2024 trade deadline reaction show. And if you're just joining us here as of late, the only move that took place for the Capitals today was that center Evgeny Kuznetsov was traded out to the Carolina Hurricanes. And I don't want to undersell that. That was quite a move for the Capitals because there was a lot of question. We remember, was it a couple of weekends ago that he was waived by the Capitals? The time flies here. It's hard to keep up with all of it. Was waived on a Saturday, cleared on Sunday, and reported to the Hershey Bears on Tuesday. Surprising a lot of people, surprising myself, as there were rumblings out there that was said that playing in the AHL was beneath him. And what is proof there is that he's a hard guy to read, that some of the things that you think he's thinking isn't exactly what he thought. And why did he report to Hershey in the first place? I think he had a pretty good hunch, or maybe his agent kind of led him on to the fact that there were some teams kicking the tires on him. Let's not forget what kind of player Evgeny Kuznetsov was. He was clutch in the 2018 Stanley Cup win. You could make the statement that the Capitals would not have won the Stanley Cup if Evgeny Kuznetsov wasn't on the team. But he did have a fall from grace, and 2018 wasn't exactly yesterday. In that time, he had went to the NHL's player assistance program 2 different times. And the last time, what was said was the last straw with Brian McClellan and the Capitals. That is why they waived him. And it was surprising to me. I know his cap hit was exorbitant, and I know there was a year left on his deal, but ultimately I thought a team would be willing to take a flyer on him. As it turns out, he cleared waiver and went to Hershey and was set to play for the Hershey Bears tonight. He was there, and then the Carolina Hurricanes owner, Jet, picked him up directly and took him directly to practice. If you look online, I posted video of he was in practice this morning. So it was, a big morning for Evgeny Kuznetsov, suffice to say. He started out the morning on the Hershey Bears, got word that he got traded to the Carolina Hurricanes, jumped on a private jet and was at practice today. Quite a whirlwind morning for Evgeny Kuznetsov and the Capitals. But the good news is that they did have to retain some of his salary, but, we don't have to worry about what's going to happen with him in years to come. He is currently the Hurricanes' problem or their player to deal with. But that is what was the big news around the Capitals today. No big fanfare, no big names brought to this team, no young talent. The Capitals are standing pat. Also, a lot of the names on the team that we thought were going to be on the move were not on the move. I'm talking about Pacioretty. I'm talking about Jensen. I'm talking about Dowd and Charlie Lindgren. They are still all on the Capitals. So the other big move that took place early in the week, of course, was Anthony Mantha moved out to the Vegas Golden Knights. And, some people are like, well, that's good. I'm glad that he's finally gone. But let's not forget what he was for this team. In return, the Capitals got a 2024 second-round pick and a 2026 fourth-round pick, and the team retained 50% of Mantha's salary. So there was a lot of salary retained this week, to be sure. But Anthony Mantha was a player that was set to be a UFA in July, and I don't think that the Capitals had any plans of bringing him back next year. So you're always better to get something instead of nothing. Again, doing this show, I hear quite a few different comments from different people saying, Anthony Mantha, I can't believe they're moving him. They're making a push. Listen, we make it to July and he doesn't get an extension with the Capitals. The Capitals got nothing. So they made the wise move by moving on from Anthony Mantha here. So taking a look at the situation here, I'll have to kind of read some of these comments as I want to make sure there's nothing inappropriate here, is that D9J2 said, maybe we'll trade for Zegras this summer. The draft capital could be huge magnet for the Ducks rebuild. And it's interesting that D9J2 brings that up, is that there were some rumblings out there about Zegras and the Capitals. And ultimately that didn't materialize, of course, as we're past the trade deadline and that didn't happen. But there are some names that a lot of Capitals fans were hoping for that would come to this team that ultimately did not happen. Another comment here is from Locked On Law. I hate salary retention. At least they have used all 3 slots now. No more of that. And here, there were a lot of people talking about salary retention, but oftentimes they do that to make it more appealing to offload players. Because, you take a look at Anthony Mantha, despite the fact that he scored 20 goals this season, that doesn't erase the fact that he has been inconsistent on the Capitals and what the Capitals had to give up to get a player like Anthony Mantha, Jacob Vrana, Richard Panik, and some draft picks. And what they got in return was a player that spent a lion's share of his time either A, injured, or B, inconsistent. And, again, Anthony Mantha is a difficult guy for me because I put into my calculator here how he played this year. And then I, factor in how he played last year and the year before, and I hit equals. And what do I see for next year? I see a giant question mark. We don't know what kind of player Anthony Mantha is going to be in years to come. I'm glad he found his way this year, but what kind of player is he going to be in coming years? That is the question that we don't know. So An interesting thing and a change of posture does appear by Brian McClellan, as he is all in on this push this year. I know he didn't make any rentals or any foolhardy decision like that, but he could have easily moved Dowd. You got to think that the phone was ringing on Dowd, and the phone was ringing on Lindgren and Pacioretty and Jensen and those kind of players. But I just ultimately don't think that either there's a couple scenarios. Either Brian McClellan perceives this team to still be in it, or the return wasn't what he was looking for. And I think it could be a bit of a mixture of both, because let's face it, you take a look at Dowd, he is a premier fourth line center, takes on a huge defensive role for the team. And those guys don't grow on trees. So if they would have just, given him away for, say, like a third or fourth round pick, oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and say I would be pretty upset about that as a Capitals fan, and I'm sure that you would be as well. And then you take a look at a guy like Charlie Lindgren. He can demand the King's ransom, and I think that ultimately they held on to him because they know the value that they have in a guy like Charlie Lindgren. And I think that ultimately he still does get moved. I think it's this summer. I think that the Capitals will ultimately go all in on Clay Stevenson or Hunter Shepard. And I think that the Capitals would also entertain ideas of moving on from Darcy Kemper. Yes, even the guy that has a history of playing on a Stanley Cup winning team, I think they would entertain offers on him just because he is having one of his worst years statistically on this team. I just think it gets a little bit more complicated. And doing this show, oftentimes I hear people say, well, why do you say Charlie Lindgren on the move? Why not Darcy Kemper? Well, Darcy Kemper, for one, is getting paid a heck of a lot more money, and he also has more term on his contract. Darcy Kemper is signed a little over $1 million, like $1.2 million, and has another year left on his deal. You got to, think that there were a lot of teams just beating on McClellan's door saying, what do we got to give up? But teams were, reluctant. They didn't want to give up that first round pick. And ultimately, I think that's what the Capitals were looking for, was a real upper echelon draft pick. And I don't think that, and then you take a look at the draft. It's a bit of an interesting thing, a first round pick. But where in the first round are we talking about? Are we talking a later first round pick? Sometimes it's just scraps left at that point. So I think the Capitals did the right thing by holding on to Charlie Lindgren, but I wouldn't, attach too many feelings to him, because ultimately I think he will be on the move this summer. And I think the Capitals are in a good position with Clay Stevenson, who is, the last I checked, the first-ranked goalie in the AHL. Not to mention that they have Darcy Kemper or Hunter Shepard. The one thing I know about the Capitals for sure is that the cupboard is fully stocked in the net minding department. So just to kind of wrap up this show, getting you guys all caught up, that is what is going on. Before I go, I have to sneak in one other comment here. The attached obsessive fans arrive. I hate everything that's happened so far. Crap return for everything I don't care about previous years. We are in this year, and Mantha has the most goals. Touche. I do hear that, and I understand where you're coming from. But the question about that for me is did the Capitals have any plans of bringing him back next year? Because we got to remember, despite how well he has played, if the Capitals fizzle, and let's be honest here, they are on the outside looking in. If they fizzle and we make it to July and we don't trade him, the Capitals get nothing. And I always like something over nothing. And, just taking a look at the teams. And if you take a look at the landscape of the NHL, the Capitals are definitely on the outside looking in. I'm not saying impossible. I'm saying improbable. That, you take a look at the teams like the Golden Knights. You take a look at the Canucks. You take a look at the Rangers. You take a look at the Canes. Teams that are just so good, they would have to totally fall off if the Capitals had any plans of winning a Stanley Cup. I think that potentially they could make it to the first round of the playoffs. Don't get me wrong. The Capitals making it to the playoffs is not a crazy thought for me, but is the playoffs enough? Do you want to hold on to a player like Anthony Mantha just for a first round when you know that they will fizzle in the first round? It's just going to happen. And this has been something, in the making for a while. And I'm just going to go off here a little bit talking about the Capitals historically and what they should have done that they didn't do and there was a lot of talk about that the Capitals wanted to blow up the roster before they won the Stanley Cup. Something crazy happened. They caught lightning in a bottle, and the Capitals won a Stanley Cup in 2018. But there were rumblings that they wanted to dismantle the team then. But then all of a sudden, something crazy happened. Well, the Capitals won a Stanley Cup. We can't blow it up. So they held on to this roster. And I think it's a pretty safe thing to say that they held on to this roster for too long. And they're not the only ones. Take a look at the Penguins. They held on to their roster for too long. And look at the disgrace that was on the ice at PPG Arena last night for the Penguins. You saw a lot of empty seats in an arena that is normally filled to capacity. Same thing goes for Capital One Arena. So those are parts of the perils of being, holding on to a roster that's aging and showing diminishing returns. I mean, we take a look at the last time the Capitals made it to the playoffs a couple years here ago already. This is going to be the second year in a row if they miss it. The first time was last year. And the time before that was 2014 that they missed the playoffs, that they made it to the playoffs against the Panthers. And guess what happened? The Panthers wiped the ice with the Capitals. Tom Wilson got injured to just start the playoffs. So the writing was on the wall for this team for a long time that they should have sold. And it's just, the ducks are coming home to roost, or the chickens are coming home to roost here. Sorry, I'm doing this on the fly here. That, you should have addressed this earlier. And you've seen this happen with other teams around the league. You see this happen with the Detroit Red Wings years ago, where they held on to that aging core for too long and they wandered out in the wilderness for quite a while. You take a look at the New York Rangers, who they kind of sucked for a couple years and then they rebuilt that team. So the Capitals are in a position that they need to rebuild. It's just if the Capitals fans have the stomach for what that's going to entail. And do I have the stomach for it? Because there's already a team that's underperforming in the Washington, D.C. area, and it's called the Nationals. I guess you could also say the Wizards and the Commanders, but let's not go off on a sidebar here. Is that do the Capitals fans, can they stomach what that means? But ultimately, I think they need to be aggressive, but they need to get younger talent on this team. I think that you need to assess who your untouchables are. And I think that you could safely say that is Tom Wilson, Alex Ovechkin, and John Carlson for the most part. But other than that, I think you should be willing to take offers on anyone. Okay, we got some more comments coming in here. I got Red Wings 01. Again, I have to proofread these before it's something obscene or something like that on the screen. It says Red Wings 01. Pens did sell pretty hard today. Touche. They did. This year, they did the thing that the Capitals should have done. I hear you 100%, Red Wings fan, Red Wings 01. I hear what you're saying. But they learned the lesson, didn't they? They learned the lesson that Brian McClellan did not, that they should have tried to move on here. Some more comments here as well. Held too long, except the untouchables, which the Pens have way too many of. Touche. Again, I hear that as well. They held on to Malkin. They held on to Letang. They held on to Crosby. And if there's something that was evident, if you guys watched the post-game presser, is you saw an absolutely dejected Sidney Crosby after. He didn't want to answer about the future. He didn't want to answer about he didn't want to answer about the future of the Penguins. He didn't want to answer the future of his future with the Penguins organization. He was very dejected here. So we have another intriguing comment coming in here. Locked On Law says, I was here in 1974. When the Capitals won less games than this year's Wizards, I can stomach a rebuild. Again, I hear all that, and if the ends, if it meant the Capitals being good in a couple years, that's the one thing that we don't know, is that it could potentially be the case. And that's what it's going to come to at some point, is that the Capitals are just going to have to pull off the Band-Aid and do a rebuild. And it just seems funny that, we keep hearing all the comments that we have to kind of just hold on to this lineup until Alex Ovechkin hangs up the skates, because there were promises made to him that he would play on a competitive team. Is this year's team competitive? I guess, you could argue that if they're competitive or not. But one of the things I also heard in Brian McClellan's press conference as well is that Ovi stays up with the state of the Capitals, and he puts a lot of pressure on Brian McClellan and ownership, saying, I want to play on a competitive team. So did they do that today? Are they on a competitive team? Is this part of a master plan where they use these draft picks to flip in the offseason? because the team, like I talked about off the top of the show there, has a tremendous amount of draft capital that potentially, ostensibly, they could move somewhere else. So that's where, excuse me, we are, I'm sorry, I've been doing this all day on the microphone, is that is where we are at with the state of the Capitals right now, is that I was hoping for bigger moves today. Those moves were not made. They just were not made. I was hoping for that, Dowd and Lindgren would have got bundled together and we would have got a big return. That wasn't the case. The Capitals held on to their core, and I'm already hearing comments from some of the beat writers there that Brian McClellan had the posture that he wants to be all in this season. That he's not going to just send this player, that player out just willy-nilly, just because that's what the insider said. I mean, you listen to Frank Saravalli, you listen to Elliot Friedman, and they had their boards of who should be on the move. A lot of those players didn't move, and you don't have to move. I don't think Brian McClellan pays any attention to what the insiders think they should do. He said, I'm not going to dump players, and he didn't dump players. Talking about another guy that is always very involved in the show, Red Wings 01. Maybe Backstrom will pull a Patrick Kane and feel good enough to play again for one last hurrah. I'm delusional, he said. Well, I hear what you're talking about, and that would have been a really good thing if that would happen. And that was, I talk about the feel good story of the year, and that was Anthony Mantha. The bummer of the year, in my opinion, was Nick Backstrom, who I had held out hopes for, that he was going to make a big return. And, Brian McClellan was non-committal on him, talking about that, we haven't seen a real favorable return from a hip resurfacing procedure. And he started off this season. He actually played season last summer. He played hockey last summer in Sweden and played really well in a competitive league. It wasn't beer league over in Sweden. He was actually playing with, fierce competitors and did a good job. It's just that whatever happened in the beginning half of this season, it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. And, he saw his diminished returns. He saw Connor McMichael coming on strong, and he did the truly noble thing. And, he took a bow and he stepped aside and let the young guy step in. And I think to a certain extent, Nick Backstrom sees a bit more of Connor McMichael, kind of like a young Nick Backstrom, if you will. And he didn't want to stand in the way of progress. And I think that to a certain extent, he also didn't want to, make a Brian McClellan make a really hard decision and say, hey, Nicky, come into the office. I need to talk to you. I think that, we're going to, put you on the LTIR or waive you or buy you out, whatever the case might be. And that Nick Backstrom did the tough thing by saying, hey, I'm going to step away indefinitely. And that presented a really great opportunity for Connor McMichael. And what has Connor McMichael done this year? Killed it. If you're an everydayer of the show, I talk about that, is that this was supposed to be the year for Connor McMichael, that Peter Laviolette was never really vested in Connor McMichael. Well, guess what? Spencer Carberry was and is, and Connor McMichael is paying off in spades. Also, another guy in that mix is Hendrix Lapierre. You take a look at how he's playing this year. And he's making a statement for himself. So a lot of questions about the team. A couple more comments here before I wrap it up here. I could be on here all day with you guys. It's just a special occasion here talking about it. Locked on Law. Oshie needs to retire. I love him, but he can't stay healthy. And that's one of the things, too, about TJ Oshie, is he's a guy that always plays much bigger than he is. And you can't fully appreciate a guy like TJ Oshie unless you see him in person. He's a playmaker. His hand-eye coordination, his hockey IQ is off the chain. It's unbelievable. And the tough part is that he plays bigger. He's not afraid of taking on the biggest guy in the league, and subsequently, oftentimes, that is why he gets injured. Another comment coming in here. I think the moves BMAC made this deadline are setting up for something bigger this summer. We have a lot of draft capital over the next couple of years, and I wouldn't be surprised if they used all the picks. Again, very likely. And he kind of alluded to that. He said in the press conference that he wants to do something similar to what he did with Rasmus Sandin, except a bit of an addendum to that. He will probably do that this summer instead of at the trade deadline. He'll do that at free agency in July. So, it's tough things for the Capitals, tough decisions. It's an aging team, but there are a lot of players that the fans love, and they're going to be upset if the Capitals move on from them. So a tough thing for the Capitals, tough decisions for them to make here. Talking about Oshie. Oshie needs to retire. I love him, but he can't stay healthy. Talking about here, Red Wings 01, he's going to be feeling those back problems in 10 years. True, probably, but he is a guy that always plays big here in Love Osh. I love Oshie. I really do. I think that you won't find a more fierce competitor than TJ Oshie. And last summer, he talked about his competitive nature. He talked about that when he has a family get together, if he has dinner at his house, that they'll play basketball and he wants to win. If he's playing football, he wants to win. And if he wrestles with his family members, he wants to win. And then he looked at everyone, the Caps press corps, and he said, what, you guys don't wrestle? So a bit of a sense of humor from TJ Oshie, but ever the fierce competitor. And he would be a tough one for the Capitals to move on, even though he's getting older. But he does offer a lot of intangibles, and I hate to use that because, you're kind of getting into the weeds there, but a great playmaker, a good hockey IQ. And I hear all your comments about him getting injured. I've actually talked about it in the show quite a bit, of him staying healthy, but it's tough decisions for the Capitals to make this summer and in years to come. And which players are going to be here next fall? That's the question. Will Oshie be back? What is the long-term prognosis of Nick Backstrom? Those kind of things, as this team is kind of heading into uncharted waters, if you will. All right, listen, I want to thank all of you for joining me on kind of this impromptu trade deadline recap, just getting caught up with a lot of the people that listen and watch this show on a daily basis. And first of all, everyone that's in the chat and watching this, I want to thank all of you that listen and watch this. However, if it's on YouTube or if you're listening to this on the audio platform, it really makes a difference and really helps the channel grow. And let's hope that the Capitals do continue to do great things going forward. Again, riding the positive momentum of a huge win over the Penguins, a bitter rival, and they won 6-0 against Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins. A pretty good story for the Capitals. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. When you're done here, find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.